Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. And welcome to the 2025-2026 Winter Wear Board Workshop, where we are working on all things clay. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make this slab luminary. So come on, let's do this. So I've decided that my lantern is going to be 5 by 9. I have rolled out my slabs and they have been prepped to the leather hard point. They are not fresh anymore. If I bend them too much, they could start to crack. You roll them out and you let them sit for about a week in plastic. I rolled them out a couple days ago and I have been laying them out on my patio area, flipping them over and rotating them just to get them to a little bit of drier consistency than where I left them off. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out some rectangles. I'm going to need 4 rectangles for my piece for the 4 sides that are 9 by 5. And then I'm going to be cutting some pieces for base and top. But for right now, I'm going to just measure out my tick marks of my 5 by 9. I like to just start myself off with a very clean cut. I'm picking out of this slab where I'm going to get the most cut and hoping to get to that 10 over there because I want to get 2 pieces out of this that are 5 by 9. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a clean cut here and a clean cut here. So much noise. Noise not within my control. Okay, I'm using the edge of my right angle square to do my measurement. Using one edge of my right angle square as a guide up against the other edge. And as long as I'm flush here on this edge, then I should have a decent square over the top end. I'll go ahead and take my measurements on the 5 and 10. I'm always rotating with one of the edges on an end that I know is flush, so that way when I make my cut, I know it's as straight as I can get it to be. Big pieces like this I'm going to hold on to because I might be able to get some roof pieces out of that. Okay, these are good. I'm going to need 2 more of these. And then a bottom. I do want to talk a little bit about this right angle square. This I picked up at Home Depot, but you can get this at most hardware stores. Both sides for this square are in inches. The benefit of having a right angle square is that this is supposed to be a perfect right angle. So if you're trying to put together box items, this is going to be the perfect thing for you, especially for something like this lantern. This edge here is supposed to be a perfect 90 degrees, and then there also is an inside edge that is also a perfect 90 degrees. But one of the things that you want to pay attention to when you're looking at this is that the numbers start from the 0 here. So this is 0 and they go this direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 0 here and goes in this direction when you're measuring. However, the inside numbers are starting their measurement at the center point of the inside. So you want to make sure you're looking at the right numbers. Sometimes if you're working too fast and you line up this edge, but then you mistakenly look at the inside numbers, you don't realize that you end up with the wrong measurement. So you want to make sure that whatever number you're lining up, that you're paying attention to those numbers as the measurement. I'm always keeping one side flush. If I don't pay attention, this can get out of hand. Even if I put that tick mark in, you can still end up with a wonky cut. I want to make sure that this edge is the flush edge. And then as a backup, I'm matching it up to my 2 tick marks. Now if you screw this measurement up, you have to start over with fresh slab. You can't just try to take slab like this and glue it back together. It does not survive the kiln. You'll have the illusion that it does, and then you'll end up with a giant crack. Even if you slip and score it together, it doesn't survive the kiln, especially if you are working with a high fire clay body. This is a cone 10 clay body. I will only be firing this up to a cone 5, but at that high temperature, you end up with a lot more stress fractures than if you're firing at a lower temperature. My slab has some thickness to it, and I have to compensate for that when this thing goes together as a box to make sure I add extra for the sides. So for right now, I'm going to cut myself a 6 by 6 box. Depending on your slab roller and how thick you've rolled out your slabs is going to depend on how much extra you need at the bottom. This is about 3/8 of an inch thick. 3/8 plus 3/8 is 3/4 of an inch. So that means that if I have a 5-inch width and I need an extra 3/4, I would need 5 5 3/4 inch to make it nice and clean and have a little bit of extra at the bottom. I'm just going to cut a 6x6. And I apologize for the crazy noise in the background. There are several houses near me getting work done. It's unusual for this. Apologies. So when I go to start putting this together, because of the thickness, there's going to be a bit extra. You can either let that extra be part of the piece and have an extra wide bottom, or you can set this up on a piece of uncut clay, begin assembling, and then trim yourself down to where you are. But in my case, I'm going to try and split the difference of that extra. I'll make it part of the piece. There's two ways I can assemble this box. One is to put the two sides butted up next to each other, just like this, and sandwich in the other side. But then I go from having an even dimension to having a little bit extra. So now if I measure this side is going to be longer than the other side. So we know that we cut 5 inches, that 5 inches is there. But now in this direction, I've added an extra ½ inch because of the width of the sides. If you don't really care too much about it, then it's fine. You just have to keep in mind that you're going to have a not even measurement going forward. The other option of assembly is to stagger the ends. So if I have this end butted up against here, and I have this end coming together meeting here, I can take the next one and make that one butt up against here so it's a different direction. And then the last one, we do this so that it looks more like a pinwheel. This one has one end here, but then it runs into the wall over here. Then this becomes the end and then runs into the wall over here. If you do it this way staggered, then you end up with a perfect square. And so this side is going to be equal to that side. And they will all be slightly bigger than that 5, but they're going to be even. So this is the way I'm going to choose to do mine. We are going to slip and score these pieces together. So I'm going to do some scoring around this one edge and then the face edge of this one. I'm going to apply some slip. Slab is not nearly as strong as coil, even though it can be faster to build once you have slabs prepped. So I am going to be rolling out some small coil. Just going to squish. This is fresh clay. I'm going to roll out some thin coil and I am going to pump this coil, actually a little thicker than I like. We're going to lay this coil into the seam and press it into that seam and blend it in. This is going to help really make this a strong joint coming together. I am going to be blending this back end. However, I don't want to forget which direction I laid this on since I'm staggering. So I'm not going to blend that until the end because I need an eyeball. So if I stacked this slab on top, then that means that this next slab has to be put on the outside. And if I went and blended that, I would have totally forgot where the heck the slab was. So I'm going to go ahead and score and slip the next two pieces that are going together. And so that I don't lose my structure, I'm just going to drag this to the end so I can keep it supported. Even though it is slab and it is a stiffer slab, it's still fragile at this stage because I don't have another side put on it. So I just pull it over to the edge so I don't have to move it and pick it up too much. And then I'm going to go ahead and score the piece I'm about to attach. And for the last one, you should sort of be able to tell because you're going to have a different height, height difference. So I know that this is the lower one. That one I'm going to score. That means that this one is going to be the side wall. That means that one's going to go up there and that butted into the side. So I'm going to go ahead and do one side here, and then this is going to go in like this, and I'm going to add my slip. But I think to help myself out, I'm going to rotate this a bit. Now because I have not blended these two sides, it is a little bit fragile, but since I know where this is going to land, I can at least go ahead and blend this one side that's facing downward here. So I'm going to take my knife and I am going to blend up my seam, make sure that these two pieces really come together. I am going to gently pick this up on edge and stand it upright. Now I can go ahead and blend that one that was facing downward, really squish it together. Now I can go ahead and apply my slip to attach my last side. I like to apply it to the loose piece, it's just easier to deal with. Remember, it's staggered, so I have one hitting the end here and it's meeting the opposite way on the opposite side. So this side butts up into the wall this way and this one is going in the other direction. And don't forget to follow that up with your coil on the inside. I'm supporting the outside as I push against the wall to blend the inside of that coil. Now I'm going to transfer this to my bottom, and you can do a measurement, but I'm just going to eyeball. Hope that I get something that looks somewhat centered. And I'm just going to take a minute to mess around with trying to get it lined up. That way I can give myself a score line guide before I slip and score and attach. Yeah, it looks pretty good, I think. So I'm going to just come in the back end, the blunt end of my fettling knife, and score around the base so I can have an idea of where this thing's going to land. For a little extra support, I am going to pipe a little bit of coil around the base. This is not necessary, but I always like to be sure. As far as I'm concerned, these are little bits and details I could always clean up later once this sets, but at least I know I got a good joint. For this lantern, I want to have a little bit of a tapered top. And in order to do that, I need to take a measurement now and figure out how long my piece is, because remember, adding on those edges has made it a little bit wider than it was previously. So we have 5 3/8, and they all should be roughly landing at that same point. I'm going to start off by cutting 4 rectangles that are 5 3/8. I also need to determine a height. I don't want this too high up, about 1.5 inches. Yeah, so I'm going to get myself some strips that are about 1.5 inches long by 5 3/8 for me. And now I need to determine how much of a slant I want it to have. So find your center point, 2.5, 1, 2, 3. And then from there, I'm just going to measure it down to 4 inches. So I'm going to put 2 inches this way, 2 inches this way. So that's 4 inches. And now I'm going to draw a line connecting that middle line to that line to take off this angle. Cut an angle, even if you want to just eyeball an angle. Eyeball the angle and then just make sure that all 4 that you cut are all the same. So I can just line this up and go boom. You don't have to measure like I did, you can eyeball. As long as all 4 end up close to the same, you'll be alright. So these 4 are going to come up and they're going to join together like this, all around, giving me this sort of kicked in look. But I gotta make these 2 ends come together without all of that bulk there. For this, I'm just gonna eyeball. I need to take away some of this. I don't know how much. And if I take off too much, it doesn't matter because I can use some coil. I'm just gonna come in at an angle, using my edge as a guide, keeping that edge and then taking off some. So I have a bit of an angled piece. You want them both tapering in towards each other on each of the pieces. So what should happen is, that allows for these 2 to sort of meet up next to each other. And then the same will happen with these other bits. If it doesn't come together perfectly, you can fill it with some coil. So now we're going to slip and score our 4 pieces together. And then I'm going to gently flip this over, pipe in some coil. This is going to become a lidded piece so that you can get your hand in there and set your candle or your LED light, because most likely that's what we use these days. So in order to do that, I just have some slab. I'm going to outline around where this base is going to be. So the bottom of this is still angled a bit. But when I take my serrated rib to come in and score, I'm going to knock down that angle as I'm scraping. So when I go to attach this, I have a little bit more of a flat there, and then any excess gap will fill in with some coil. And make sure my sides look even. Go ahead and cut around the extra. And I do have a gap, but that's okay. We're going to take some fresh clay and fill it with coil. I am working with B-Mix. This B-Mix, even at the leather hard stage, it lends itself well. Being able to pipe some coil in here and getting a good connection, and I'll be able to get some coil also in on that inside. We need some edge for this to sit up against, but we also can't leave this solid because once I cover this over with the top, it'll become a bomb. And I need a flat top here for my handle, or at least the look of a handle or finial, whatever you want to do for finishing off the top. I want to make sure I have some rim because I'm going to be putting in a little bit of a coil around so that it doesn't knock all over the place. Oh my God, every time the camera starts, the plane goes by. So I'm going to take a measurement of the inside of the box, and it's best to do this as close to your corners as possible because if you do it in the middle and you have like dips, you know, from working with it, you're not going to get an accurate measurement. I got 4 and almost a half. So I'm going to cut a square that is 4.5 by 4.5. So this, in theory, should fit the inside of that. Now I want it to have just a tiny bit of room, so I'm going to shave off just a small amount, about 1/8 of an inch off of 2 sides. So I'm just under the spacing of that. Now I'm going to take my top. This is going to be centered, eyeballing center. You could measure if you want to. I just eyeballed mine. I'm going to give myself some guidelines. Now you can't attach slab to slab, and I also can't leave this solid. It's gonna have to be just like a little frame type of box, and I don't need it this big. I'm gonna measure a 1/2 inch from the edge all around. I keep these 1/2 inch dowels kicking around for situations like this so I don't have to deal with doing measurements, and I will just use this as my up against the edge. It's a score line, and I can score around it to get my 1/2 inch. If you don't have one of these dowels laying around, you should get some. If not, use a ruler to measure a 1/2 of an inch in from the edge, and then I'm gonna cut that square out. So this is gonna get slip and scored to the edge in a moment, but I also wanna get rid of all of that inside space too. And now I'm gonna score and slip and attach my square. If you don't remove the extra, smacking this amount of slab next to this amount of slab, the chances of trapping air in there are very high. So you will end up with an air pocket that will probably blow off. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my slip. I'm pinching around and trying to attach those 2 pieces together. My fingers are under this edge and pinching along it to get the 2 on there. I want to get a nice, decent connection here. Then I'm going to use my fettling knife to clean up this edge, give me a good blend. If you're digging too much into it, then use the back of the fettling knife. And now, the inside, if you feel like you need it, you could go ahead and add some coil. And before we go attaching a top here, we can test it out, make sure it fits. Yeah, that's what you want. So we want to make sure that we got a little bit of wiggle room, but that it's not so loose that this thing sort of comes flying off. Next up, we're going to be putting a top on, but you know that we have this bevel, so you could either leave it on and just cut a piece that's going to fit right inside this square and then add some coil like we did to get rid of the gaps on the other side, or you could try and take it down a bit by flattening it, holding your fettling knife at what looks like it's sort of flat. Come in and take away the high points of this edge. And now you're going to cut another piece for this top. You can take a measurement. For me, it looks like 4 1/8. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up a square that's going to pop on top of there. You have the option if you want to leave this top square or if you want to cut off some to make it part of the angle. I think I like the square, the raised part of the square. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that part of it as I blend. Now the important part is to follow up that lid on the inside with your fresh coil. So you want to roll some soft clay, some fresh clay in there and really get that seam line coiled in nice and well. You need to do this part before you put any kind of top on. Like if you want to put a little handle or a finial or something on top of it, you got to get this part in first. And so you can see why we cut this open. You don't want to have any trapped air. If you got trapped air, what we call a bomb in the kiln, this clay is full of water, and when you put it in the kiln's job is to dry out all of that water and then convert the molecules of the clay into stone. If you have trapped air, all of that water turns to steam as the heat rises, and then that steam has nowhere to go. So if I were to leave a slab over this, I'd have a big chamber in there of hollow air that would, once the steam starts happening inside of the kiln, it's gonna have nowhere to go but out. And so it literally will explode. You don't have to do any cleanup right now. We're just assembling this in the rough state. It needs to be wrapped up overnight so that all of this joints and all of these things that we just attached together have a good chance to really attach themselves. This all becomes one consistency and it can come together and attach itself. So I don't care about any of this roughness right now. I just really wanted to make sure that all of my joints were assembled and in this rough stage. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up in some plastic and let it set for at least one night, if not more. And then it'll be time to do a little bit of cleanup, attach some sort of knob, and then it's time to start carving away. I've just uncovered this piece. It's at a good stage because I left it to sit for a week. It's time for the cleanup. Now sometimes I like to use a short form, but lately I have been really happy with my loop tools, these trimmer tools. They do the job well. So I'm just gonna do a bit of cleanup before I begin my carving. I'm going to follow it up back of my fettling knife, a little bit of burnishing here. I'm going to be doing the same to these sides, but before I do, I want to soften this edge as well. It'll help the glaze roll over the edge because the glaze, when it hits sharp edges, sometimes it doesn't really stick. It'll roll over the edges depending on the glaze that you're using. I'm going to just use some hand forming to make something somewhat pleasing. I am going to hollow some of this out. Just eyeballing center. If eyeballing makes you feel uncomfortable, go ahead and measure. I'm going to have to come back and clean up some parts of this knob after it has time to sort of stiffen. I got myself some printouts. I paid for some of these templates that were from Etsy. However, you do not have to do that. You could literally just go print out any kind of pattern, any kind of picture that you like, and use that as your template. So I think I'm going to go with these three. And I think this will be my center, my middle straight on one, and these will be my two sides. I think they tie together well, and the fourth side is I'm going to leave solid, so that way when the light goes in, it has something to sort of bounce against the background of. I'm going to cut these down to this outer line. Things can get a little confusing, so I went ahead and I colored in my template. So I'm going to be cutting out the white space. I know it would have been easier as to darken the negative space, but I did this on purpose because if you have a printout and all you have is the positive space of an image that you want to transfer, then you'd be looking at something very similar to this. So I just put some water here on my piece, and I'm going to eyeball what looks like roughly a 1/2 inch border around. Now there was one spot I did want to point out. So for this drawing, there's some areas where it doesn't make sense because it's so close to the edge not to just complete this and bring it to the edge. Since the black stuff is staying and the white stuff is getting carved out, having this touch this point would add for more stability. So I can carve out this whole thing and I don't have this leaf sort of hanging out in the middle of nowhere. It's not really a leaf, it's the point of my snowflake here. So you want to look at your design and really look if there are places where it doesn't alter the design too much, but to have it touch the wall so that you have more stability, you have more points of contact that are going to remain. So now I am going to take an X-Acto knife. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you might have one of those tools that look similar to an X-Acto knife, but I highly recommend that you use an X-Acto for this. So I want to pay attention to my white space. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting right through the paper. It might be a little difficult at first navigating the paper as well, so you might have to score a bit through the paper and then complete the cut. You don't have to use these templates. Maybe you're really great at drawing and you want to come up with drawing your own pattern. Then you can just use a needle tool to go ahead and map the surface out of your drawing. So I had my first casualty piece. This leaf came off. I just slip and scored and reattached it. So a design like this intricate, is definitely a more advanced design. Maybe if you are not up for the challenge or something this intricate, you might want to stick with something a little less complex, a little simpler. So I think I'm going to figure out some of these areas that maybe I don't fully carve out, and maybe I just leave as a halfway carve where I remove some of the stuff but not all of it, versus the ones I want to poke all the way through. And then I am going to remove my paper so that I can really figure out what I want to do going forward. In some areas I think I'm going to just do a shallow carve. My goodness, what are you doing? You're just having a wonderful time laying on this stuff and crushing my bits of clay. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the paper. Hopefully I have left myself enough indicator marks. Now after I picked up my design, I'm going to come in and to figure out where the design is over the bits that stay and go. So this pricking technique with the needle tool may not be your jam. Maybe you just want to freehand design using the needle tool and figure out where you're going to be cutting out. I like the template. So just pop it in to give you a bit of an update on the lantern. I did have to stop working last night because it got a little too dry as I was carving. So what I did was I sprayed it down and I wrapped it in some plastic so that it wouldn't fully dry out on me, because as I was carving and working the bottom, there was a lot of time where this was out in the exposed air. So I went ahead and sprayed it down, wrapped it up, and I did complete the carving on this, but man, let me tell you, was it freaking intricate. So the other thing I did was I did come in and I took a bevel all around the edges. It helps make it feel a little bit thinner. Working with slabs in this thickness, it is a little bit thick. After this experience, going for it with this design, which I'm really pleased with, I really like it, but I decided that the two sides for the trees I have reworked and I have softened the line. So I came in and I knew that doing some of these intricate cuts are going to be a bit of a pain. Really softened the heck out of this one, and then this one sort of softened those lines as well. So these two will become these two side pieces, and I will have my work cut out for me. Ba-dum-bum. In a little while, I'll be working on the rest of that. I have been keeping the lid wrapped up because I was waiting for this top piece to set. The problem I had with that was keeping this wrapped up, waiting for this top part to set. This base, as it dried, shrank a bit on me. So I will keep this in the open air and leave this out next to it, because if this is in the open air, then this has to be in the open air, otherwise it's gonna not shrink together. For the cleanup, I went in with my X-Acto knife, took an angle cut, getting these edges softened. It needs some more cleanup. Yeah, the crazy intricateness of this first pattern I chose is not for the faint of heart, right? You know, don't pick something this intricate to start off with. If you are new to the game, maybe pick something that is a little bit more simpler in terms of your negative space carving. Y'all, if I had to do this all over again, I would not pick something as crazy and intricate as the snowflake version, but you know what? I'm glad I stuck it through. I really wanted to push this material and see how far I could get it to go. And all in all, it's not too shabby. You know, I do have a couple areas that need a patching, but beyond that, I'm pretty pleased with the results of this one. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. And stick around for more clay to canopy fun.